Hi, Game Master Brian, and welcome to Step 2. We've got a big one today, folks, so let's jump right in. Our word of the day is self-knowledge. It's a big one, and this is how the game is defining this word. The personal discovery of your inner self. Tools for aiding in this discovery include, who am I and what do I want? Okay, now let's take a look at our code of the day. Number 2, here it is. The essence of knowledge is self-knowledge. What we're going to do right now is we're going to take a look at 4 different people all around the same time, 500 BCE, and they're from very different parts of the world. We're going to cover Egypt, Greece, China, and India. So let's take a look. Now in ancient Egypt, it was customary in the sarcophagus, in the tombs of the pharaohs, to include something called a Book of the Dead. There's not just one Book of the Dead. It was a custom more than it was a text. But we have fragments from these, and these fragments have been compiled, and in addition to the engravings either on the walls or the sarcophagus itself. So today we have this thing called the Book of the Dead. And so it's this compilation over many, many years. We're going back 12,000 years ago. So this is a really interesting slice of history. Anyway, there are 2 quotes from the modern Book of the Dead that have to do with self-knowledge. So let's take a look at those. The first one is, you are one who knows yourself. You are complete if you know yourself. And the second one is, man, know thyself, and thou shalt know the gods. You want to reach to the heavens? Start here first. Okay, let's take a look at Thales of Miletus. Now, we call Thales a pre-Socratic philosopher, but he actually wasn't Greek. He was from what was the area of the Ottoman Empire, so he was across the water from Greece, still northern side of the Mediterranean. And let's not forget the important contribution the Ottomans, as well as the Berbers, made to modern living room furniture. Anyway, Thales had this to say about self-knowledge. The most difficult thing in life is to know yourself. Starting to see a theme, right? Now let's jump over to China. Again, the same period of time, and this is what Confucius had to say about self-knowledge. The mind of the superior man is conversant with righteousness. The mind of the mean man is conversant with gain. When we see men of worth, we should think of equaling them. When we see men of a contrary character, we should turn inwards and examine ourselves. And one of the things I love about reading folks from a long time in the past is that there are so many great parallels between themselves and modern thinkers. Carl Jung was a super prolific, important member of the 20th century, and he said the same thing, as Confucius is saying at the end of this quote here, and that is, if you see somebody and they piss you off, something about what they said or something about what they did, chances are it has nothing to do with them. It's about you. You're reacting to a conflict inside of yourself that your brain has identified in another person. So our natural inclination is to point fingers, but we should actually be pointing that finger inward. It's a great tool. It'll make you stronger. The Upanishads, and I probably butchered that pronunciation. Again, very, very old text. We're in India now and have this to say about self-knowledge. Inquiry into the truth of the self is knowledge. Look at that connection that they're making. They're not saying that if you inquire into yourself, you're going to arrive at knowledge. It's saying they're the same thing. You can't separate them. They're one and the same. Okay, so we've looked at Egypt, Greece, China, and India. Now we're going to follow history from a little after that period of time all the way up through the modern era in terms of self-identity. Plato. In every man there's an eye of the soul which is more precious than 10,000 bodily eyes. So what Plato is saying is that if you want to leverage yourself, don't spend your time looking outside. Start with, and throughout your entire life, Look inwardly, and you will discover the truth. Ibn Arabi, a Berber, again, contributor to modern living room furniture. Now, this is Northern Africa, and he was an Islamic a cleric. I don't know if you call him a cleric or not, but certainly an Islamic mystic, considered one of the greatest thinkers ever to live, had this to say about self-knowledge. My voyage was only in myself, and only pointed to myself. This is a journey to increase knowledge and open the eye of understanding. If you want to understand the outside world, you got to start inside. Petrarch. We're now in the 1300s, so we're in the Common Era. This was an Italian thinker, had this to say about self-knowledge. I shall be content if I succeed in knowing myself. To reach this end, I strain my eyes. I never lose sight of it, nor do I cease praying to the gods that they may teach me to know myself, and grant, as the wise ought to desire, that I always be mindful of my goal. So now Petrarch is clearly speaking from his heart, and he's reminding us that this is not something that you arrive at. This is something that you spend your entire life doing. Lord Montaigne, or Montaigne. If I study it, it is for no other science than which deals with the knowledge of myself. Montaigne was one of the great leaders of the French Renaissance, and he hits it hard. If you want to have knowledge about the world, you got to start here. Miguel de Cervantes, author of Don Quixote. It's a stupidly thick book, but don't let that intimidate you. Once you get into it, it will suck you in. And besides, some teacher's going to throw it at you anyway, and it comes from great art. It comes along with great artwork because of Picasso. So there's all kinds of reasons to read this book. It was really considered the first Western novel. Anyway, Cervantes had this to say about self-knowledge. Thou must keep in view what thou art, striving to know yourself, to know thyself, the most difficult thing to know that the mind can imagine. Again, important, most difficult, all in one package. Alexander Pope, an English poet, born in 1688, had this to say about self-knowledge. Know then thyself, presume not God to scan, the proper study of mankind is man. You know, what I take away from Pope's words is, don't wait for someone else to do it for you. It's not going to come from the outside. You're not going to be told what the truth is. You've got to do it yourself. Ralph Waldo Emerson, born in 1803, so we're starting to come almost into the modern era, got about another century to go, had this to say about self-knowledge. Wherever we go, whatever we do, self is the sole subject we study and learn. Emerson's telling us you cannot get away from it. You can delude yourself into thinking that you're away from it and that you're separate from it and you don't have to worry about it, but that's nothing but delusion. And if you want to be powerful, you cannot engage in delusion. Delusion is for passive people who do not seek power in life. Friedrich Nietzsche, he was a German philosopher and educator. Nietzsche's the kind of guy you invite to your party if you want the whole conversation to blow up. Because he would walk in and he would say, as he's going to say in this quote, you think you know, but you don't. Anyway, let's hear his words on self-knowledge. So we are necessarily strangers to ourselves. We do not comprehend ourselves. We have to misunderstand ourselves. For us, the law, each is furthest from himself. Boy, did I mess that up. Each is furthest from himself applies to all eternity. We are not men of knowledge with respect to ourselves. You think you know, but you don't. Hermann Hesse, Siddhartha. It's only about that thick. It's not long. It's easy to read, but wow, what a powerful book. If you've not had it in 9th or 10th grade, you're probably not going to get it assigned. Take the initiative. Do it yourself. Siddhartha. All right, what did Hesse have to say about self-knowledge? Nothing in the world is so distasteful to a man than to take the path that leads to himself. It's a tough row to hoe. Here's a metaphor if you've never owned a garden. It's a difficult task. It's important and it's equally difficult. Aldous Leonard Huxley, born in 1894, author of Brave New World, in addition to a number of other books. He was a very, very prolific writer during his time, had this to say about self-knowledge. If most of us remain ignorant of ourselves, it is because self-knowledge is painful, and we prefer the pleasures of illusion. There it is, ladies and gentlemen. You can live your life in a state of illusion, but if you think that you're a powerful person, you're not, because when you're in a state of illusion, you have no idea who you are, and you're just drifting around untethered from anything. Self-knowledge, it's a hard thing, but it's an important thing. All that's good and whatnot, but how exactly do we start this process? How do we take our first step? There's a million different ways to do it. So we're going to do it in a certain way within our game here, and we're going to do it through the following 3 questions. So let's take a look. How do I respond to vulnerability inside and outside of myself? So we can use the word vulnerability. We can also use the word weakness. When we're confronted with weakness, what do? Second question. Is vulnerability an opportunity to exploit, or is it a responsibility to nurture? So now we're building on the first question. So we are confronted with weakness. What do? Do we take advantage of it, or do we try to help? Here's our third question. What is the difference between exploitation of an opponent's weakness on the playing field and exploiting the weakness of individuals within society? Okay, so the point there is that we're getting a lot of conflicting messages. I was captain of the wrestling and the football team in high school, so I know it as well as anybody else that in high school it's pounded into you. If you see a weakness in your opponent, pounce on it. Taking advantage of your opponent's weakness is the name of the game. It builds aggression. Now, I was also a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and the battlefield is very similar to the playing field in the sense that you're looking for vulnerabilities. You're looking for weaknesses that you can take advantage of so as to dominate. But the larger question is, how do you run a society? Can you run a society like a battlefield? Well, in fact, we know that's not the case in the West, because in the West we have laws protecting the weak. As an adult, I'm limited to the interactions I can have with the minor, because as a society, we look at those age differences, we look at the developing brain of a minor, and we say there's too much opportunity for exploitation. So we're going to draw a line, and we're going to protect the vulnerable who are young. We do the same thing with the old. If you're a senior, you have special laws in place that protect you from being exploited. So you have to ask yourself the question, who am I as it relates to weakness? When I see weakness, how do I respond? Do I exploit it or do I nurture it? All right, I want us to read this following piece. This is written by a gentleman in 1680. He is from the Punjab, so he's an Indian. I actually went to the Punjab a number of years ago. It's the northern part of India, considered the breadbasket of India. The technique here is similar to what we call a koan, which is from Japan, but this is Indian. But look at the structure of his language. And what he's describing for us is that, I'm neither A nor B. I'm not even part of that conversation. I'm separate from that conversation, because that conversation is really about labels that you're trying to place on me. And see if you can see that play out in these words. Remember, you can always come back to this, and it's included in the PowerPoint. So you have 2 ways to access this to come back and read it multiple times. Let's jump in and look at it. Bula. What do I know about who I am? I am not a believer in the mosques, nor do I follow the rites of unbelief. I am not amongst the pure or the polluted. I am not Moses or Pharaoh. I am not in the Vedas or in the scriptures. I am not in drugs or in liquor. I am not among the drunken reprobates. I am not in walking, nor am I in sleep. I am not in joy or in sadness, nor am I in pollution or purity. I am not of water or of earth, nor am I of fire or air. I am neither an Arab, nor am I from Lahore, nor an Indian from the city of Nagur. I am not a Hindu, nor a Turk from Peshawar, nor do I live in Nadum. I have not discovered the secret of religion, nor am I born of Adam and Eve. I have not given myself a name, nor am I found in sitting or moving about. I know myself to be first and last. I do not recognize anyone else. No one is wiser than I am. Bula, who is the Lord standing here? So I'm not going to comment much more on that. That is an internal experience to read a text like this. So I encourage you to come back and ponder it a number of times. Okay, so we've talked about self-knowledge equaling power. When you know yourself, the answers to life questions will always be found within. No pain, no gain. Okay, here's our essay prompt. Who am I? Folks, this is going to be part of your final portfolio. Today is the first step down this path to answering the question of who am I? And what's going to be fun is when we're all done with this course, we're going to be able to come back and look at how you answered this question to begin with. And you're going to tell readers the story of your progression, of your evolution from this first day that you wrote this essay to where you are by the time that you finish this game. All right, don't forget you've got yesterday's essay to deal with. You've got this essay, the Who Am I essay, to knock out for today. And we'll see you tomorrow at step 3.